many of the communities in the valley who are divided up. I represent 13 different communities, and 11 of them are divided. I share them with some other council members. Only 2 of the 13 communities in my district are wholly within CD2. Now that just, that disempowers communities when you live in Sherman Oaks and you have to look at a map to figure out who your council member is. It shouldn't be that way.
So I gather you support Sherman Oaks being within one council district.
Well, to the greatest extent possible, let me leave it at this way because the Citizens Commission is still working on that. To the greatest extent possible, we should preserve the integrity of communities. Sherman Oaks is a community of interest that ought to be treated as a community of interest. Studio City is a community of interest that ought to be treated as such. We ought to be respectful of neighborhood boundaries.
We have 2 questions, one from Dick Bergman and one from Michael Leonard. And their question is, what is your position regarding the 30-day impound of unlicensed drivers' vehicle? And Charlie Beck's position on this?
I'm struggling with this one a little bit, and I'll tell you why. Charlie,
can you define the
here's the issue. So the issue is, and I'll be honest with you, I haven't boned up as much as I need to on this yet. But the issue is basically this. State law requires that under certain circumstances, a driver without a license will have their vehicle impounded for 30 days, a minimum of 30 days, I think it is. Now, state law also, recent state law, has required that if the only violation that the person has is the lack of a license, under certain conditions of being stopped, then that would not apply. So if you're on a suspended license, then your car would be impounded. But if you don't have a license and there's no other offense under this new state law, then under certain circumstances, the car would not be impounded for 30 days. Charlie wanted to implement that for not just the DUI stops, but more generally, as I understand it. Now, I think cars of people without licenses need to be impounded, and people with licenses need to drive those cars home. There's 2 questions. One is 30 days an appropriate time for that, or is it unduly punitive? But the second question, which is more troubling to me, is what the chief of police has said is the chief of police has to make public safety decisions, not politicians. And that's kind of a compelling argument to me. So I haven't met with the chief yet to discuss it. But my personal preference would be that I think that cars should be impounded. I think we should stay the course with the current policy. I'm a little reluctant to tell the chief, based on a political decision, what he can and can't do with his police force. So I'm undecided. I still have to work that issue.
Wynn Cohen and Chuck Betts have a question concerning rent control ordinances. And the question is, why are small owners with vacancies now have to have a document notarized and recorded concerning vacancies in their unit? And they said that this was passed by the City Council in July of this year.
I'm not familiar with this.
All right,
so I'll have to find out. Jeremy, did you? Okay, we'll find out.
They'll come up and ask you, or Jeremy.
Sorry, I'm not familiar.
And Dick Barrick asked, the LA Housing Department restrains rents. They limit late charges that landlords can charge to no more than 6%. But if an owner of an apartment building is 1 day late on their fees to the city, there's a 150% penalty and a 200% penalty. Is that not abusive?
There's a lot of abuses going on in the LA Housing Department, and I think that the housing situation that we have has, as you've all seen in the news, there have been a lot of scandals that have arisen and a lot of things that need to be cleaned up. I've been one of those who stood as a pretty strong advocate for small apartment owners to try to make sure that they continue to be viable businesses, because if we're going to have a housing stock that is going to remain affordable, you have to have building owners who can make a living at owning a building and who can actually have a situation that's not abusive, where they're not unduly punished for trivial violations. And so I don't know about the 1 day late deal bit. You can talk to me about that afterwards, the 150% penalty. But I think you know that I've every chance I've had, I've tried to stand up to have fairness applied to small apartment building owners.
Dan Anderson asks, what's the latest update on routes at Hazeltine and Ventura and the traffic light situation there?
It's not really part of his district. It's really
correct.
It's on the border of this district.
Yeah,
Right.
but that's Paul's district, Paul Koretz's district. Thank you. That's in the 5th district, and so I won't be able to give you the current update on that.
Jerry Winterman asks, sometime in distant past, I heard that stoplights in the valley would be synchronized. Has that happened?
There was a lot of synchronization that happened, as I understand it, well before I was on the council, and there was some federal money, I think, that was invested in doing that synchronization to try to move traffic more efficiently. You know, one of the problems with that is I don't know that we necessarily want to encourage traffic to move efficiently on our major boulevards if that encourages people to speed more. So, you know, that I don't know if there have been recent synchronization efforts. This was a priority of the mayor's some years ago that I know he got federal funding to get done. I don't think there's any current effort ongoing. I'm confident there's no current effort that's ongoing right now to spend more money.
Marshall Long.
It's all that we can do to get streetlights installed where we need them. And we've made some progress with that. I think, you know, we installed a streetlight at Weddington and Hazeltine, and we had another terrible pedestrian tragedy that happened on Laurel Canyon. We got a streetlight working with Tamar's office at the school district. We actually expedited a streetlight installation there as well to try and slow traffic down.
As you may recall, in this very room when you were running for office, you pledged that you would uphold strict compliance with the Ventura Boulevard specific plan. The question is, why have you not taken a position against an Il Biagio Toscano project that violates the plan?
Well, we still don't know what that project is going to be, and they're apparently, you know, changing it now again and doing other things. They haven't presented it to me yet. But what we've told the developer of that project is I'm not going to take any position of support, certainly. I'm not going to take any position on that until they come and make a presentation to you. And so after they come and present it, whatever they're going to present to you, I want to hear what you have to say about it. I want to hear what your comments are about it. And only then will I decide whether or not what my position on that might be. But, you know, what's happening right now, I think that fortunately, in my view, the viewpoints of the community has apparently caused them to reconfigure the plan, and they're coming up with new plans which have not yet been presented to us.
Janet Couples has some specific questions about this site. She wants to know, why does a company proposing to be building a green building want to build in such a smoggy area? She read in the LA Times that this was one of the worst smog-infested areas in the whole city. And what would happen to the smog level if this project is built due to the increased car trips?
What business? I'm not sure.
This is the project, the Galleria.
You know, obviously all of that would have to be assessed in the EIR, but you know, whether they're green or not, I think no matter how green you are, there's going to be a lot of car trips that come out of a project like that. So hopefully they would offset some of the impacts, but there are going to be car impacts which are going to have lots of air pollution impacts. That would have to be part of what's considered the EIR, and it's either going to have to be mitigated or not.
L.P. Heitmeyer asks, are you supportive of the Ridgeline ordinance proposed by Councilman Koretz?
sorry to have to say, I don't know what his proposal on the regional line ordinance is.
All right.
I don't know that question. Sorry.
Ellen Vukovich has two questions concerning anti-shrubbery park.
Okay.
The first is, are you aware that poison is being sprayed at the park without any posted warning signs?
What poison?
They freely spray Roundup in order to keep the weeds down, and they do it when...
She said they're spraying Roundup to keep weeds down.
That's right. And they do it during busy times at the park. Children, adults, dogs are being walked, and they're in that vicinity, and there's no posted signs. And when I professionally landscaped, we told all of our clients to keep away from Roundup for at least 10 days when we had to apply it on the lawn to kill it. It is highly toxic. It goes by another name, which most people don't like to hear. It's called Agent Orange.
Okay. Not aware of that specifically, but one of the things I didn't mention earlier is that with the new committee assignments, I've been named chair of the Arts, Parks, and Neighborhoods Committee, which oversees our park system. So tomorrow, I'll call the Parks Department and find out what the status of that is, and I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Her second question is there any change, will there be any change to reopen the Van Nuys Sherman Oaks year-round pool on Mondays?
So here's the problem with that. But the Recreation and Parks Department has had significant cuts, as we know. They have closed pools to year-round use throughout the city. And that's honestly just the reality of their budget needs, which they've been cut by 40 or 50% over the last few years. It's been disgraceful and disastrous to our parks. We have pools that are crumbling around the city that we can't even maintain right now. So a couple of things on that I've worked with the department on. One is, if we can't have 7-day-a-week pool use, or if we can't have year-round pool use in an area, then we should make sure that in a cluster of neighborhoods, people have other options.
Exactly.
So if one pool is closed in one neighborhood, there's another park nearby that still is open, so that swimmers can use that pool. So yes, we're going to have pool closures, but at least do it in a staggered way so that certain things aren't unduly impacted and you have a ready alternative. That's number one. Number two is, we are considering with the Parks Department putting on a possible bond measure for repair, installation, upkeep of swimming pools in our parks, because it really is pretty disgraceful, the condition that they're in right now and the lack of resources for that. And I think the people of the city would consider that a very high priority, a core service that our parks provide to neighborhoods that otherwise wouldn't have that recreational opportunity.
And you can't escape the inevitable questions concerning the football stadium downtown.
Take that one all day long.
Ellen Kornblum and Bill Gasparo have a series of questions. They want to first know, is there any taxpayer money going to be needed for this project? Or any of the hotels adjacent to the project?
Okay, that's a separate question. Just briefly, this project is a football stadium, but it's also a reconstruction of one of the wings of the convention center. And I was one of 3 council members with my colleague in Sherman Oaks, Mr. Krekorian, as well as Bill Rosendahl. We were the only 3 who stood up at the beginning of this and said, wait a minute, what's the big rush to approve this? Yes, it's all great to have Magic Johnson throwing a football around at a press conference. It's great to have cheerleaders and balloons. But shouldn't we at least look to see what the impact is on taxpayers? So we were the ones really that ground the whole thing to a halt so that there could be an ad hoc committee created so that we could actually vet these things and so on. What I concluded was that on the project itself, as it was proposed, yeah, there would have been taxpayer impacts that would have been unacceptable. throughout that process, the project got got better. So that the financial consideration of it, the general terms of the financial considerations of it that were outlined in a memorandum of understanding between AEG and the city were such that the benefit that we got from the new convention center and the increased tax revenues that that would produce made it worth the risk, the remote risk, that there would be any out-year taxpayer impact. There is no direct funding at all from taxpayers in this project, none. So the only risk would be if AEG issues these bonds to do the construction, and if they should default and so on, would there be any back-end risk to taxpayers? I became satisfied that there was minimal, if any, risk because we would actually take ownership, the city would take ownership of the equity in that stadium. So, and there was significant other things. They had to put up a significant letter of credit that the city would be able to get, and there were a number of other, belts and suspenders protections that there wouldn't be any risk. Now, the operation of the thing, that's a different question. If you've got 70,000 people going into a stadium downtown, are there going to be impacts? You bet there are. None of those have even been considered yet. So this is not a proposal that I'm prepared to sign off on yet, because I want to know what are going to be the traffic impacts, what are going to be the air quality impacts, what are going to be the water impacts, what are going to be the, is there going to be any jobs creation benefit? They always talk about the jobs creation. Well, the truth is, if you are spending, $100 for a day at the football stadium, that's $100 that you're not spending at the movie theater in Sherman Oaks or the restaurant on Ventura Boulevard or buying yourself an extra tie at the clothing store. So this idea that there's going to be some big infusion of money that's going to be an economic stimulus, I think is baloney. Now, but the convention center is a good thing. That having a new convention center is absolutely essential to this city being able to capture that new tourist revenue, the new revenue of big conventions that provably produce a lot of revenues. So I'm really concerned about the impacts. I'm concerned very much about the traffic impacts. This is the Harbor Freeway, for Pete's sake. I mean, every other freeway, can you imagine a Monday night football game at that stadium? At 6 o'clock kickoff on a Monday night on a stadium next to the Harbor Freeway. So I'm really concerned that we have to, look real closely at those sorts of impacts. None of those have even been considered.
Okay, Paul needs to leave here at 8:15. The important part of the meeting is to allow you to come up here and ask him one-on-one or explain situations or problems one-on-one. So with that, we'd like to thank you for, thanks for